Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to Public Affairs and Religious Liberty, where we have a studio audience today, and I want to thank those who've come. We will be talking about who is checking the details. Who is checking the details? As they say, the devil is in the details, and many times that is the truth. So as we begin with prayer, left that door closed. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for this day. I thank you for life, health, and strength. I thank you for all that you have done and all that you will do. I pray that you will bless our feeble attempts to proclaim your word, and that what we do will be in line with you. We thank you for this in the holy and precious name of Jesus. Amen. All right. The section on world events, we will look at more than one video, so here we go.
You're listening to The Corbett Report. CorbettReport.com.
Welcome back, friends. Welcome back to The Corbett Report. I am your host, James Corbett of CorbettReport.com, coming to you, as always, from the sunny climes of Western Japan, here on this 19th day of June, 2020. Welcome to episode 381 of The Corbett Report podcast. Who will fact-check the fact-checkers? And yes, as I'm sure you can discern from the title of today's episode, today we're going to be talking about a very important topic that directly impinges on the work that I do here at the Corbett Report and that the independent media is doing. Sorry about that. Pardon the interruption. As I was saying, every time you go to share a link to this type of information that I deal with here at the Corbett Report this day and age, it seems that you get some sort of warning that... Oh dear, this is going to be a problem, isn't it? Well, as I was saying, you get some sort of warning that this information is that most dreaded phenomenon of this information age in which we... that this is fake.
Sometimes the news you find on the internet isn't real. It's what we call fake news.
Fake news is when news, stories, or hoaxes are created to deliberately misinform or deceive. Still, recognizing fake news is hard. That's why it's up to you to be critical of what you see and hear online.
What percent of the American people who see fake news believe it?
75%.
If we are not serious about facts and what's true and what's not, then we have problems.
So we've gone a few minutes into this, and let's weigh this out. The question comes up, who is checking the fact checkers? Because those who profess to be the fact checkers and who are checking the facts, as previous President Obama is saying that it must be about facts. Then what happens when the fact checkers get it wrong? What happens when their information is biased or it is politically motivated? It has they conveniently leave out details. I'm going to ask one of our members of our esteemed audience, as a teacher, there's a lot in history that can be, the word's not overlooked, but it,
Whitewashed.
well, that's a word that comes to mind, or it's just not spoken of, meaning you don't say anything negative or positive about it, you just don't emphasize it. You only read what's in the textbook, and if the textbook kind of just gives a very short detail of it, you don't expand on it, especially something that is critical. And you can justify it with time. I mean, there's a lot of factors. As example, when you talk about Reconstruction, there's a lot about Reconstruction. There's a lot there. So if you only focused on what parts of Reconstruction that affected or benefited one group versus the things of Reconstruction that benefited or hurt other groups, because there are things across the board that helped all groups, but there are things across the board that hurt a lot of people doing Reconstruction. So I say that is when you talk about facts.
And I'll actually go from a different point of view.
Okay.
For example, when you look at the Spanish-American War,
Okay,
that's
yes.
how we label it.
Okay.
But when you actually go to Spain, or even in our U.S. territory, Puerto Rico, which was
Okay.
acquired during that war in 1898,
Okay.
it's actually called the War of American Aggression from that side.
I've heard that term, but I didn't know where it came from.
So having said that, it's also about who's putting out the information
There you go.
and what view they want you to see it from.
Who you want, like you said, whose view you want to be favorable, right?
Or viewpoint
Viewpoint,
that
viewpoint.
it's coming from.
That it's coming from. Like an example is, I'm going to use this as an example, individuals who like football or soccer, if you hear the commentator from one country and he's talking about it and they're not doing well, he sounds much different than the one from the country that is doing well. They sound different, one of excitement, but even in the way the game is, and I say that is because you're getting the same game, but it's spoken in the favor of it. Even if the game comes down to where neither side scores, the how both view that same interaction. And I see your hand. You mentioned the Spanish-American War. Okay. What about when we look at Santa Anna and the war between, I guess it would be Texas and Mexico? Is that fair to say?
That would be fair to say, yes.
As I was reading history, there's, like you said, a different viewpoint. If you're looking, as they say, south of the border, looking north, a different perspective, because by all rights, there was aggression toward them for a land that was understood to be theirs.
Right.
And when the actions at the Alamo, that the way it's presented in the American history books is a lot different than the viewpoint from that of, I guess you said, could I say a Mexican national at the time?
That
would that be fair?
correct, yes.
And I appreciated having two different views, so now I can see and make my decisions off of that. And that's the problem that I'm seeing. You had a hand, sir?
No, I was just going to simply say that history has always been favorable to the one who's telling the history.
True.
And so, for example, if I'm, using your analogy, if I am the home team,
Yes.
then what I am seeing is going to be favorable to me. If you are the home team, then what you're saying is going to be interpreted as favorable to you. So whoever is doing the interpretation of history is going to be favorable to them.
Well, that's if you're trying to, because like I said, in regards to history, because ideally history is supposed to present both viewpoints and leave you, the reader, to interpret.
It's supposed to be, it's supposed to be non-biased.
Yes, right. Non-biased.
But we know from history that it's been biased towards one side or another.
Yes.
Like to the Indians, it would be biased towards the Americans.
Yes. Favorable
Towards the Americans.
Mm-hmm.
It would show that they did. I'm talking about
who? I'm sorry.
to the Indians.
The Native Americans.
The Native Americans.
The ones that are called Native Americans.
Native Americans,
Yes.
the whole ordeal of the blankets and all those different things.
Yes.
It will be favorable to the Americans, but not to the Indians. If you got the story from them, if you got the account from them of the whole ideal of how the swap was with the blankets and the land and all, I guarantee you that they would give you a totally different account of how that whole thing happened.
Correct, and you can find those accounts as well, but you have to be wanting to look for another viewpoint.
And here is, not only that, you have to look for another viewpoint, but here's what happens, unfortunately. And I've been guilty of it, and I don't know if all, but if you don't do adequate research, if you Google something and you just look at the first 5 popular or what populates at the top, it doesn't mean that that's the correct answers, but people go with the one or the two. They may see one, go with it, especially when it's on a subject that they really are not trying to dig too deep in, or they see. And so you will find that in individuals' research, it is wanting because, like you said, they're looking to see, are there individuals who recorded this history, and did they record it, like you said, either non-biased or from both perspectives?
Or did they, no offense, because especially here in the United States, a lot of our history that children are taught is whitewashed as well.
Yes.
And so sometimes you get the history, then it's whitewashed. Like, for example, some textbooks here in Texas say slaves were workers. And then it was a beautiful life.
And
this is in current textbooks. I'm not talking about from 20, 30 years ago. This is in current textbooks that were, since I am a teacher, they were just approved last school year. So stuff like that occurs.
So then those should be hit with those sensors that the gentleman was using as an analogy. Those should be hit with the fact checking, because the reason is I've recently had that happen to me on several posts that either I reposted or post on Facebook. They get hit with this has been fact checked and it is incorrect. And I didn't, once I see it, it's one of those, I know people try to fight them, but you get so many of them and you get put in what they call Facebook jail and you're not able to post or something like that.
But I will also say this is the age of where conspiracy theories are also perpetrated as truth as well, on both ends. On the right and the left. I mean, there are quite a bit of noise that's actually not
factual.
True. Yes.
This is correct. What it does is it makes it very difficult for the things that are factual to come forth, and we have to be mindful that a statement that is implied can be taken and made into, as it said, like you said, a conspiracy theory, or because it's implied, and by the nature of who implied it, in turn, if they have a big enough platform, it is used against them go ahead.
No, I was just going to simply going to say is, I will always say that it's not really clear who does the fact checking. Mm-hmm. If I said it right, I can't enunciate my words. Who does the fact checking? Mm-hmm. Who does that? Who's paying for that? What agency is doing that? Where is that being funded from?
Is it, because that's a good question. Like,
because it should, if it's being non-biased, then Facebook shouldn't do the fact checking.
And
a third party should do.
And if they have a third party, it should at least be transparent to understand that their funding is not, it's transparent, so you know that there's the appearance, at least, that there's not a inherent bias to the fact that, okay, if you work for the federal government, as an example, and then you're now to go and investigate federal agencies on them following various federal guidelines, as they say, the proverbial, you don't bite the hand that feeds you. So would you go into the very government itself and find improprieties and then now put that out there? Because that's what your job is. It can be very challenging because, politically speaking, people can lose their job and lose their position and their power in that. And people tend to love that. So now you have a conflict of interest because the very agency that you work for, being it, I'm using the government example, and you're to critique it. That's why the press, if it's done as it's supposed to, and they write articles, editorial pieces, questioning policies and that, they should have that ability and leeway and not feel pressure because it's the consumer that buys the newspapers or, in this case, looks online at it and supports them. So it's the market that drives it, not, feeling the pressure.
Well, I was just going to say, well, one thing, when you say an editorial piece, that's not those are opinion pieces. Those are not factual.
Okay, so
that doesn't necessarily mean that's factual.
So
it's an opinion. Like editorials are opinion pieces.
So then I have to retract using the word editorial, and then if an investigative journalist goes and investigates it, and then they have sources that give them credible information that they can they make allegations against the company? Okay, so they make that, then you're right. I can't use the word editorial because, like you said, that is an opinion. Even if that opinion has facts behind it, it's still an opinion. Go ahead, and we'll circle back around because there's a point.
No, just from personal experience.
Okay.
Since we're talking about fact checking,
Mm-hmm.
I have posted videos of an individual saying something on, for example, Facebook. I have posted someone saying that the sky is blue.
Yes.
I'm just giving an example.
Yes.
Verbatim, they verbally said that the sky is blue, and Facebook, because it was different from what
The official narrative?
the official narrative was saying. They said, well, we fact checked this, and we've determined that this was false. This was partially false. So what I had to do was I had to go repost it again with that video. Now, when I've done it that way, I reposted it with an individual saying, "Well, I'm sorry. Let me go back. I will put that not the video, but the article saying that this person said this. Okay, and then they'll say we fact checked it and we determined that this is partially false, and I stamp it over there where you can't even see it.
Yes.
So what I would have to do is I have to go find the video with the person actually saying the information, and then they don't go back in. It's hard to say, well, that's not what that person said.
Because it's
what they're saying out of their mouth.
Well, yes and no. Because one thing I can tell you, having taught journalism, because one of the things, like you said, is to make sure when people are doing journalistic pieces, they're trying to get the reader to buy the story that they're selling, whether it's true or not. So having said that, and one thing we know, especially in this climate that we live in, I can take a segment piece, cut up just those words, forget the rest of the context, just like people do with art on a different subject. Like our prophet, people use certain pieces
of Ellen G. White,
of Miss White's writings.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
No, but having said that, they don't put the whole context or even the
but
subject
I'm not
point.
even. But I'm not.
But
I understand.
Let me finish my point.
Okay.
So my point I'm making is, because I noticed you said there was partially.
That's what Facebook said, that it was partially incorrect.
But my point is, sometimes, and I'm not
That is
saying you are
accurate.
guilty of this.
Yes.
That's not what I'm saying at all. But I do know that sometimes people will put out clips to make a viewpoint without having the context, because I think sometimes context is important.
Oh, definitely.
And I think what was said, why it was said, and I think sometimes that's left out. And so I know I have seen other people's posts where they've left things without the context, and it's been fact checked, as you say, and then I'll go back and look at it, and then I'm like, oh, okay, well, this was totally not even in context to what the person in the post was making.
Well, and that's why I use that specific analogy when I say that, and I understand totally taking something out of context and applying it to try to make it like you take Bible scripture and you take it out of
Right.
context and you apply it to a subject. But that's why I use an analogy. If that's what I'm showing, that this individual said that the sky is blue. That's all I'm trying to show, is that the individual said that the sky is blue. That's it. Nothing else, as they say, that's it and that's all. And Facebook will say, well, that's partially true that the sky is blue. That's partially true that this person said the sky is blue. No, this is what the person said.
Which leads doubt to.
This is what the person said, that the sky is blue. That's all I wanted to show, was this person said that the sky is blue. 3 words. Or the sky is 4 words. I had to count on my finger.
Well, not to tell on my cousin, but I will say, because my cousin is one of the people that does this stuff for Facebook. She stated that, and I know algorithms are part of the thing that gives
part
them
of
the
the process.
information anyway, because so much information is placed on Facebook. But she did state that sometimes when, depending on who the individual is and what other, not you particularly, but what other people may have been putting out there, she says sometimes we'll flag all of it together, and then sometimes they will, what did she say? They'll actually have to flag it. That way people can try to look for the information in the context portion. That's what she said. That's ideally what they try to do.
Well, and that's what somebody else said. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to share this. That's what somebody was sharing with me. That's what somebody was sharing. Somebody close to me was sharing with me that the algorithms are set up as such to, depending on what you post. Well, everything that you post, the computers are so intelligent, it determines how you're thinking.
Correct.
And so, which can flag an agency that this person is possibly heading. You ever seen the movie Minority Report? That's how the algorithms are set up.
Well, and also you have to keep in mind it's also based off of your other, because you.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Your
That's-
other history, because
that's
you agreed to when you signed up for Facebook.
Well, I'm agreeing with you.
Right.
That's how the algorithms are set up to determine that this person may be, in the future, do something. Based on and putting all this information that you post on Facebook, and you think it's just on Facebook, for if you
Or
post somewhere,
research in other
right, and
spots,
you
yeah.
research it,
Right.
because if you don't want to, you can believe it or not, it grabs from other apps.
Right. They
on
share
your
they talk
phone
to each other.
or on your computer. They talk to each other, and and this is what this person that has a degree in this thing says, that this is what these computers do, and they determine that this person may be a threat to society.
The segueing back to it.
I didn't
The,
go into a deeper subject than what you were going to.
Well, not so much that, we're segueing back to who will fact check the fact checkers, or as we summarize it, who is checking the details. Someone said in our comments that this was one of the most corrupt presidents, and this happened to be Steele on President Obama. All presidents are corrupt if you look at it from the lens of have they acted against the American people in the interest as that what they were voted or nominated or selected, or however the process you want to consider they got to their post. The things that they have done that are not for the people, all of them are can be considered guilty of that. So if just isolating one, it would not be purely factual to say one or the other. question as we circle back around, who will fact check? And we highlighted this as we began this conversation on history, and that those who are what we consider the winners of history, or come out on top, get to write the story. Let's look from a spiritual point of view, that the Bible, which has been refuted by so many, the Bible itself, it is within it, we understand that it was holy men who were moved by the Holy Spirit. They wrote the Bible. The Bible stands on its own, and it is his story, particularly Revelation, which is the revelation of Jesus Christ. And so there is no need for fact checkers or external fact checkers, meaning people, a third party, to look at the Bible. That is some of the problem we have today, is that individuals have looked at the Bible and said, we don't agree, so we need to have these different versions that change the context of things. And there are some that attempt to say, make it modern, but others take that liberty and go even further. What is that? The poetic, is it called poetic license? But they take it even further, and when you read the scripture, it takes away the very essence of it, and you're not able to determine what was the Lord saying here, because the context is taken away. And there's examples of it. I didn't pull up one right now, but as we look at it, it is a very critical question, is who is telling you what is right? Because when we look in history, when the Bibles were locked up and it was in Latin, and you had only those who would learn Latin, the priests, individuals, could tell you what it said, they could tell you or give you the impression that it said one thing when it actually did not say what they said, and what they were telling or teaching you was not biblical. So we see that when the Reformation came, well, first when the press, what is the press called? Gutenberg, which created the Gutenberg, the Bible, and individuals could begin to read it in their own language and understand, and they could see for themselves. That reformed, I mean, it just spread across the, Europe and over, because now individuals didn't have to get their facts, rely on the priest. Well, so what we see is the world coming back in a digital age to a similar system, in that it's not that the words are in a different language, but those who are saying that's approved and not approved is become the thing of the day. And we know that we hear this phrase a lot, all roads lead to Rome. You can begin to see that thought pattern. Now, people say, because again, someone will say, we fact checked it, and the papacy has not said that they're trying to control social media. The mindset, though, comes from them, if we look historically. So, they have not maybe made an official, that I've seen, an official declaration that they want to control it. However, we're looking from the lens of prophecy and saying there is a point where this beast power will want to control. And it will have this, not only will it want to, it will be allowed for a space of time. And so for us to state that is truth, but it's biblical truth, but it is a future truth, but it's a near future. I mean, we're already seeing the unfolding of that. We see the people use these terms, technocracy, and that we see corporations and we see entities wanting to control what it is that you see, what it is that you learn, and what it is that you think, even, because they want to benefit or gain from that, particularly economically. Because if you believe the products that they have, you believe in the the idea that they're promoting, then in turn, they will profit from it. So definitely we have to look and we have to ask as Christians to have spiritual discernment, to discern that the things that we're hearing coming to us, is it pleasing to God? Because there are a lot of things that we hear out there that's not pleasing to God. It does not build up our spiritual character. It does not build us. It does not prepare us for Christ's kingdom. It may not be directly evil or that, but it's almost like talebearing or when it's feet that are swift to mischief. The Bible says it creates this because a lot of people are frustrated and have anxiety over things that are minimal when it comes to their spiritual life. But yet, because again, I see how people get very uptight and that over political ideology. And that has really, to the point where depending on which side of the political spectrum you're on, you could be in the same church or even in the same household and have animosity toward one another. When we ask the question at the end of the day, yes, those ideas are out there. Yes, they can be fact-checked, but does what we're spending our time in, will that prepare us? Will the time that we put into these things, will it prepare us for a soon coming Savior?
So,
yes, sir.
And just for real quick, I just wanted to mention this point because we talked about fact checking and things of that nature. And I just wanted to come back to the inspiration of the word, that it is God that inspired the word.
Yes.
So I'm actually going to bring out one example, how
please
it's truly inspired. When you look at the life of David,
Yes.
David is known and as a well-renowned general,
Yes.
a good king,
A poet.
poet, wrote a lot of the Psalms in the Bible. But if we're looking at how man writes history,
Yes.
I don't believe, and I can honestly say
Yes.
this, his affair with Bathsheba and the whole covering it up would have been placed in the Bible
Oh, no.
if it had not been inspired by
Yes.
the Lord.
True,
When
true.
you look at, and that's
His
just
transgressions,
one,
yeah.
right, that's
Yeah.
just one account. So I just want to point that out there. That lets you know that God isn't like man who looks at human history from our lens. He looks at it from a different lens. He put David's examples of his failure, but he also put David's example of his repentance afterward.
And his triumphs. Yes.
And he
Great
put
point.
both of it, both parts. Like even when David sinned and took the census on,
Yes. I'm glad you said
he
that.
wouldn't have put
a lot
that
of people,
in there.
yes, he wouldn't have.
if-
His children.
Right.
I mean, the things
So-
that they did, they would cover that family affairs up.
Yes,
You
like
know, smooth it out.
Tamar's
Yes.
rape and everything.
Yes, I mean,
by
that's
her
insane.
brother.
By her
right?
brother,
Yeah.
definitely. For those who are not familiar, the story of one of the,
Abishai.
is that,
That's
yes.
his name. Yeah.
And he raped his sister, and then Absalom went and killed, his brother. Now, they were not, they were half-brothers, but they're still
half-brothers,
brothers.
right.
They're still part of the royal family.
Right.
So when you read the story of David, you are looking at something that movies can copy, but they are imitators, but not originators, because the original stories of intrigue are right there in the Bible, all over the place. And definitely, because you know the end of the story, but when you read it and read it from that context, it's very central and titillating, and different words that are used. I mean, exciting, So as we move forward, let's go to our health section. We're going to skip over our country living, and
Greetings, brothers and sisters, family and friends. I'm your minister of wellness. Just wanted to let you all know about the recall of beef sold at Walmart for E. coli contamination. Now, E. coli, it's a bacteria that can really cause a lot of sickness and disease, and it develops in the intestines of warm-blooded mammals. Now, that means us and other animals. It comes from these disgusting animal factories. That's where it comes from. These factories are weapons of mass destruction. They are breeding ground for disease, brothers and sisters, and we should not be eating the flesh that comes from these places. We should not. People fight me on that all the time. People want to quote scriptures to justify their ridiculous eating habits. And I always tell people you can do what you want to do. If you want to be stupid and eat disease processed animals, go right ahead. But don't be surprised when the biological laws of cause and effect catch up to you.
I have a few important announcements.
So I just wanted to share that first beginning is because whenever we hear these reports of the food being recalled and E. coli and that, to understand that bacteria count and disease that is in these places is very high. The animals themselves come in with diseases and that. And the fact that the farmers who are selling them to the meat slaughterhouses, the slaughterhouses cannot test every cow, and they don't test every cow. They test a percentage. They don't test every cow that's brought to market because that would literally hold up production. You are required to wait a certain amount of time in between if your cow was designated as having some type of disease and you were giving it vaccinations, and if they did not, something as simple as hoof rot. But if a cow does not get over that and they cannot put that pressure or their weight on their foot, then they go down. I mean, a farmer is not going to have a cow that is basically sit on the ground, that can't eat, can't move around, and especially if it's a milk cow, because they can't milk it when it's laying on its udders or it's on the ground. I mean, it's very difficult, I would say that. It's very challenging. So they don't waste much time to getting those cows to market. And you say, well, how do I know these things? It's not because I read it, but I've seen it. When I worked on the farm and dairy for the academy, we had to assist cows where you would put them in a device. Basically, you'd put like a contraption or rope underneath their hind legs or their front legs, depending on which one was injured, and hoist them up so they would take pressure, and you'd have them in a stall. And in that stall, they would be there for a time. And then when the time to send them to market, they would be loaded, like literally with a bucket loader or a forklift or some type of device. You pick the cow up and you now put them in the trailer or put them up on the back of the truck. I mean, and to some, it would be considered almost inhumane, but they're going to slaughter. And I can't say that the cow knows that, but it's in distress because it cannot stand and on its own, and then it goes off. And that's just a cow that has something very, and I say mild because hoof rot is mild and it's considered all the other diseases that are out there, but it's still something that's in its system, and it's still, it's much like if we were as humans to have gout or gangrene or something along those lines. But the issue is we can elevate our feet and we can do things different, where a cow that doesn't have that luxury of being able to put a cast on and walk around. That's just not how it works. So that's one example. Another example is that when a cow does get various diseases, and I'm just one I could think of, but we would hit them with the different antibiotics and that. Well, that's inside of the cow's system. So after 30 days after the last injection is when you're allowed to send the cow to market. So that means 30 days of feeding this cow, taking care of it. And because, unfortunately, the profit margin on farms is not great, and the workday from sun up to sundown, you've got enough to do, tending to a sick cow generally is not very economical, I'll put it that way. So therefore, individuals might wait a week or two, but they're definitely not waiting 30 days to send these cows to market. They will, maybe give part of a dose if they see it. But what I'm saying is many cows, it's part of the business, have gone to market earlier than they should. And unless somebody is caught or so happen they do a testing, but it's rare because, again, the cost of it. I mean, we're talking about now the slaughterhouse has to hold these cows up, put them somewhere, and then take their blood, do a sample in that. Basically, they just ask for any records. They go from there, and some meat that is determined that it is because they look at the condition of the cow as well. They look at what type of thing, what if it has a growth growing on it or whatever. Some of the meat doesn't actually make it to markets for humans, but it's still in the same place. It actually goes to dog food and other things that is used to be consumed by other animals, or I said other animals. It sounds like I'm putting humans in the area, but those beings that are carnivores. What I say all this to say is, we ultimately need to go to a plant-based diet. And I'm speaking to myself, I'm speaking to us collectively, because we will not eat cows, lambs, flesh in heaven. Any flesh. Chicken, fish, you will not be.
And that wasn't the Lord's plan for us anyway.
Never was his plan. I appreciate that. And when it was instituted, the Lord specifically said it was to shorten your life. And that's something, that's powerful.
And it was also not supposed to have any blood in it, which is where the flavoring for meat comes from.
Thank you, that is. Blood or fat. And the fat is where a lot of these poisons hide, or the body stores them because it doesn't know. Even within our own bodies, things that it does not know what to do with, it becomes like a storage bin, and then it goes from a bin to now a storage facility, and then it becomes a building, and we gain weight, and we're like, where is all this stuff stored? And the body says, well, maybe I'll store it for later use, but it's really, it's almost like, well, what do I do with all this? And we found that, many times if you go through your storage bins and that you find things that are that you think that they'll have a use and that you don't. But our bodies are designed in such a way that the Lord has given us the ability to store that. The body's purpose, which it is wonderfully and fearfully made, is that storage to be that you could feed from it at a later date to provide energy. But because we consume things that have these trans fats and have these different things, the body is now storing way more than it needs to. And as we were saying with fats, particularly from meat products, those house that. So definitely, yes, sir.
I was just going to say, before you go to your next segment, I gave the wrong name, so I want to correct that.
Oh, yes.
The name of the son that defiled Tamar, his name was Amnon. So I wanted
Amnon. So it was an A, but it was Amnon. Yeah. Okay. So. Thank you for that update, that fact check.
I wanted to
yes.
clarify it.
Clarify it. All right. So as we go to stewardship, want to focus on this update. It's just an interesting, a little more omnibus, but interesting view of what is going on.
Evidence is stacking up against the optimistic economic predictions of a quick return to normal in the form of a V-shaped recovery. In reality, the pandemic and following economic collapse are only beginning to take their toll. For one, Americans continue to suffer job losses. In fact, over 1 million U.S. citizens have filed unemployment claims each week now, for a total of 13 weeks in a row. Furthermore, economic activity is sluggish even as states across the country begin to open restaurants, stores, and other businesses in stages. In a perfect world, the end of lockdowns and the return to somewhat normal life was supposed to signal a bounce back for the economy to levels seen in 2019. However, the numbers are not rebounding as expected. Economists surveyed by Dow Jones predicted that the United States would see 1.3 million new unemployment claims last week. But the real number turned out to be higher by 200,000 Americans, around 1.5 million. Keep in mind that before this current crisis, the single worst week for unemployment claims saw 695,000 new filings back in September of 1982, a staggering number, but nothing compared to the record highs now hitting the U.S. Even experts are baffled as to why claims are so persistently high. According to Ian Shepherdson, the chief economist at Pantheon Macroeconomics, this could be because the aftermath of the initial economic shock caused by the pandemic is still making its way through some businesses, or perhaps businesses that believed they would survive the crash are now finally giving way. All in all, it is clear that recovery will be much slower than originally anticipated. The total number of Americans who have filed unemployment claims since the start of the pandemic is already pushing beyond 44 million. Even still, there were enough new people losing jobs over past weeks to more than double old records.
This here is, I found interesting, is that
Originally anticipated. The total number of Americans who
with 44 million individuals having unemployment claims, not all 44 million actually receive the benefits. That's the number of claims. Let's bump it back by 10 million and just say 34 million people actually receive, and 10 million aren't able. They are not eligible for whatever reason.
Well, they're still backward in a lot of states, to be honest with you.
You said second, sir?
They're still backward in a lot of states, to be honest with you.
Well, yeah, there's like individuals who have not actually received their benefits, and there are individuals who do not qualify because of various reasons. I'll give one example. If they overpaid you at any time, you are eligible because you meet the requirements, but you're ineligible because you have back payments or overpayments that you have to repay.
I was just going to give another example because I know this. I know about this one. Or maybe the company that you worked for is no longer the government's not able to get a hold of to prove that you worked for.
Well, that's an example, and so then you you're not able to receive it, or they cannot prove your employability there. So by that being the case, and if that company for some reason did not pay unemployment tax, not your federal tax, but your unemployment, which is a state level tax, which funds the system. There's a lot of different levels. So individuals are saying, but I worked, I have information, I show paycheck stubs, but they didn't take that out. And like you said, if that company either doesn't exist or cannot be located immediately, they change names or any of those things, change addresses, then now that individual, there's not an immediate record of this. But what I was finding very interesting is that in many countries, when individuals at this scale lose their jobs and there's this much political unease, people ride in the streets, not protest. I mean, like go out in the streets and they demand their governments to do, and you see that. And it really in America, you've not seen individuals up in arms because of this. And I highlight that I'm not saying that there are not people who are struggling economically. I'm simply saying, though, that what people have chosen to do, because when you look at other countries that have less than what we have, and then when individuals find that they don't have at all, I'm just trying to think of the language, I just see the unrest. So that I'm saying that to say, is it because there's enough individuals who they have seen, things haven't gotten as bad as they could be, that they have not just gone out and said, I'm poor, I'm broke, I'm destitute, I'm about to be evicted? Or is it because, what are your thoughts on that? Is it because I know that some states have said we will not immediately push to evict people, because once you don't pay your mortgages or your rent or different things, then, there's a certain number of days, by at least 30 days, they're kicking you out. I know in the state of Texas, it's like 45 days in the rears they can go after you, but generally they don't want to do that because they need you to continue to pay. They prefer you to stay in the home because they don't want to have to, but if they need to, they can actually. Texas is one of the states that can, the process is quicker than others. Some states is like 60, it's like, that's why you can have people 2, 3, 4 months behind on their payments and still in their home. Whereas in Texas, most realtors or those who are holding a note aren't going to let you stay that long if it's up to them. So I say that, though, is I know that there's grace in individuals, but what happens when that is no longer and it's back to the normal standards? Hey, you got to pay or you got to go.
Well, Texas is already back to the normal standards because they've already had evictions. As a matter of fact, last week, because they're all done. They're currently being done virtually. Okay. And the way it is.
How you have a virtual eviction?
Just like you have virtual meetings through Zoom and everything else. See, they have a platform that they have. They have the meeting. The landlord goes to the tenant comes. And what they've done for the most part last week from the different ones that I saw is that as long as the tenant showed up, they were able to get grace. If the tenant didn't show up, then they were evicted, and it was processed through. So having said that, they are doing that. In regards to your initial question on why isn't there uprising in the street because I don't believe it's hit all of America yet. It's not to be funny. 44 million. This country has 340 million people here. That's what 10%, 20%. That's a very low number for the population, for our population
overall. Right. So because when they're speaking, and I know this video, the gentleman speaks very omnibus, and that we see numbers greater than what. Of course, we have a larger population in the United States than we did at that time. So, of course, the numbers are going to shatter. That's like comparing different eras of sports, or I'm just using an example, when the average height of a man was 6 feet in a sport, and now you have the average height of somebody 6'5", 6'6", and you have 7-footers across. You begin to see it's a different viewpoint. You can't compare the two. So you can't compare that time in numbers wise. You can compare percentages, but you can't compare the exact numbers to say, because obviously with, like you said, 340 million Americans in the United States at this time, that's way more than it was then. So of course, if you go by just the sheer actual even percentages, you're going to have more numbers now than you would, like you said, more per capita or more. And then you have a lot of things also hitting. So like you said, it's really that across the United States, it has not hit these jobs that are starting to go away that were there. In retail, restaurants are not reopening.
Gyms are not reopening.
Gyms not reopening. They're filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy across the place, all of them, or just closing up shop altogether. It's like the game, and it's not a game, but it's like the game, the musical chairs where you pull a chair out. Well, as long as the music is playing, people don't actually realize how many chairs are gone until it's time that the music stops. And where there are 15 people and there were 10 chairs, that just means 5 drop. But now there's only 5 chairs for 15 people. That means 10 people are going to drop off. That's when, like you said, so right now the music is still playing. And individuals have moved from one thing to the other, from fear to frustration and anger. Now they're moving them back to fear. But as we see, it's going to, but eventually the music will stop long enough that people will realize, I will not ever go back to that job, or it's going to, because some jobs, it's just in their industry, it's not there. They're going to have to look at other options. Yes, sir.
Well, I thought it was in July when a lot of unemployment is going to end. The additional $600.
The additional $600 is ending on the 31st.
And
they're not extending that.
Then the music kind of stops.
For a lot.
For a lot of people, the music stops for a lot of people, and then you're forced with reality, do I have a job to go back to?
Well, yes, because that extra $600 a week, because we dialogued about that extra $600 a week ends on the 31st. So you're really looking at individuals the way the payment process goes, there's a little carryover. So you will see individuals that will still receive a week of it or some of it into the first week of August, that depending on how they're paid, because there's this pay structure, meaning not everybody's paid on the 1st and 15th, when you receive unemployment. It depends on when you're processed. Some people are paid 1 week and some people pay the other week. But at the end, that's all the states. But yes, by the time school is in, whether we're actually in the classroom or we're doing virtually.
The state will be back in the classroom.
The state will be back in the
For
classroom.
teachers.
Yes, but what I'm saying though is by the time school is fully in, individuals across the board will see that. And because for many who had, this literally is replacing their whole income, that additional 6, and some it's raising it because what they received in basic benefits, plus the 600 is actually giving them more than they had. People were living good, but they weren't saving it. They weren't looking at it from the perspective of, this is an additional 600. I need to save some of it, if not all of it, because really I only was eligible to receive X amount, whatever that X amount. It could be 200 a week. It could be 500 a week. It varies. It depends on, there's formulas in this. And so I say that is, like you said, the reality will hit then. That's the first stage. And keep your thoughts. Next question is, on the stimulus, is there still going to be a true, and I know there was a part 2, but another round of stimulus, which is not, it's like a part B of stimulus, I should say, because to say part 2, there was a part 2 which helped refund it, but that's not the part 2. I'm saying an actual second round of stimulus. So that's a different question. I saw your hands. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to point out several things. Remember, when you're talking about that $600, only people that were receiving unemployment benefits were getting that. So it wasn't like all of America was getting that.
Oh, no, yes.
Number 2, and once again, I point to the number, it's 44 million, if that, people that have the potential. I'll use the potential. That's
potential, because not even all those. Because if you were already receiving unemployment prior to that, you may or may not have got the actual 600.
You were included in the 600.
Okay.
I don't. Depending on your state.
Yes,
most states they
I think it was across.
Everybody got it additionally. But having said that, I'll just put it this way. I don't think, because a lot of people have gone back, well, I can't speak for other states. I can speak for this one. A good number of people have gone back to work. And there's also a good number of people that received the extra $600 that did save it. So I won't say that because spending is up amongst the middle class, not this most of these people are not middle class that are receiving. So that's
unemployment.
Its majority is not middle class.
There's a
it's
portion
working class, and there's a difference between working and middle.
You used the term
so that's why I
class.
said middle class is the one that's spending right now, because it's not wealthy, because they're not spending anything because they've already said that's a problem for our economy as they were.
Which that's interesting, because now would be a time for the wealthy to spend from the perspective of things are becoming cheaper overall because...
No, but what they spend on is not... See, people think they spend on...
It's not a liability. Whatever they spend is not a liability.
But they're not going out to spend it. That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
yes,
okay, I see what you're saying.
No, I'm talking about
He's talking about services.
I'm referring to...
yeah.
Well, no, because that's where most of our economy is, not to be funny, most of the jobs are in service. They're not in anything
hotels
else. They're not in retail. Excuse me, that's a service. They're not in... manufacturing or things like that.
Gross domestic.
We're agreeing. We're actually agreeing. What the wealthy are doing, or they're buying up assets. As far as they're getting wealthier.
Well, they've been doing that.
Well, especially
rate
in this time, I think it was like your Amazons and your other tech companies, as you alluded to,
technocracy.
Yes. Yeah. They made, in this few months, they've made $500 billion.
Oh, I believe that. Maybe, I'm hoping the stimulus, now this is a bias, I will put this out there. I'm biased, and I'm hoping the stimulus that they put out there will be debt relief for student aid. That that actually will generate some money for the economy.
Now, when you said that about the stimulus, for one second I thought they were going to do the stimulus, but as you see more people going to work, what is the need for the stimulus?
Well, because they're trying to float the economy, essentially. Because the economy is still literally on the brink of falling. Mm-hmm. It really is. And the reason why I say that is because you still do have sorry, I didn't mean to laugh, the virus, attacking you left and right and putting businesses out of
the dreaded virus
out of work, along with the unsocial unrest, because the economy does not do well when the landscape of the country, of any country, is not
stable.
Well, and our landscape is definitely
not well. Yes.
full,
Because you have,
full
like
of
you
upheaval
said,
right
upheaval,
now, right.
And it creates fear, and cities are people avoid areas. They're like you said. Overall, we do better. Just like an economy of a city that has sports teams, when that sports teams are doing poor, individuals are sad, and they actually see on the day after some big event in that city that there's less economic.
Right. For example, when Circuit City's company that went away in the last depression, or last recession for the economy. When I remember when we already knew when the Cowboys won, because this is the market we are in, we were going to sell TVs.
Wow.
When they did not, we did not.
Wow.
So
you could directly correlate that. I mean, like, it was you literally saw that people, and the same as, like you said, the restaurants and establishments around would not have continued business, because once the team lost, people didn't hang around and eat and socialize. They went home frustrated, and so they saw a drop in business and sales and revenue, yes. So as we move toward, we're moving along. So we'll do this on the Beast Report. This is what I found interesting, and I will let it play.
Now, I told you yesterday that Catholic priests are receiving JobKeeper payments. This surprised me, and judging from your feedback on Facebook and elsewhere, it doesn't sit too well with many of you either. This came to light through some reporting by the ABC that focused on the Catholic Church. Well, we've since ascertained that Anglican clergy too are getting these payments. The applications are made parish by parish, so I've got no official numbers, although a spokesperson says 60% of all parishes in the Anglican Church would qualify. And when it comes to the Jewish faith, we've spoken to rabbis who are receiving the payments, but again, applications will be made.
So this is not in the United States, but I found it interesting that this gentleman it's called the Kinney Report, Sky News, he was saying that the Catholic Church receives JobKeeper payments, and JobKeeper payments are the equivalent in the United States of unemployment. So he's going to go on and explain that there were individuals that lobbied for this there and allowed that, but people didn't know and were aware of this. But this calls into question the issue is, okay, so yes, they can put out as a job application to be a priest, but there is a process with which you just can't be hired technically off the street if you did not go through the various tenets to be recognized as a priest. And the fact that they could be laid off, there's a lot of questions that create because of the fact that the church organizations are considered nonprofit, therefore
in our country, yes.
In our country particularly, but not only that, they can fall into that, and they can fall into the 501c3, which is another designation of that. But they don't, if I'm correct, they don't pay. The church itself does not pay. What taxes it doesn't pay? It doesn't pay taxes on itself. Is it sales in that? It doesn't pay taxes at all, right?
Sales,
not on sales, because ultimately, the question would be, are they paying in? Because what I understand from my previous time in unemployment, if you work for these private schools or you work as for these different church entities, they do not pay unemployment tax, and they're exempt from it. And that's in the United States.
Just like education is exempt
yes.
from it.
So therefore, to be able to receive that, there's no money put into the coffers or back into the tax system, because the money has to be put in there for you to receive it out. Somebody has to pay it. The person employed does not. It's the employer that pays it. And because the employer, being the Catholic Church in the United States, is exempt. Now, the question is, in the country that it's in, are they exempt? And that I'm not sure of. But you can see that where they have the leverage or someone advocating for them, then you're seeing it, and that has caused a uproar here. So that's kind of the background. So we'll let it play some more.
By synagogue, from synagogue to synagogue, community to community. So, as we thought, it is more widespread than just the Catholic Church, with many churches and religions putting their hands out for help. And also, as I suspected yesterday, the reason this has not become a political issue is that it seems both Coalition and Labor MPs have lobbied for this. They've lobbied for JobKeeper payments to go to religious officials. With the churches not agreeing to speak about this, I thought it would be worthwhile to discuss the ethics with Dr. Simon Longstaff, who heads up the Ethics Centre. He joined me to share his thoughts earlier. Simon Longstaff, thanks for joining us again. What's your view on this, that clergy, Catholic clergy and other clergy around the country actually are qualifying and receiving JobKeeper funding from taxpayers?
Well, I think the central point, Chris, is that the Church has argued quite strongly, and it's very effective in its lobbying, that although priests would normally not be considered as employees, which was after all the intention behind JobKeeper, nonetheless a special exception should be made in this case so they become eligible. The thing that I find a little troubling about that is that the Church has previously defended itself and evaded liability, if you like, for example, in relation to the sexual abuse of children, in a case particularly of Ellis's, where they said, well, they're clearly not employees. And so I suppose for ordinary Australians, they're going to ask, well, are you only an employee as a priest when it suits the Church and not in normal circumstances? And that, I think, is somewhat problematic in terms of consistency, if nothing else.
Yeah, that's a specific point for the Catholic Church, and we have focused a lot on the Catholic Church. We know that there are at least 41 priests in the Diocese of Parramatta on JobKeeper, probably hundreds around the country. So with the Catholic Church, it's argued in the past that priests are not employees when it comes to culpability for sexual abuse complaints, but now for the sake of JobKeeper says they are employees.
That's it, that's precisely. And I'm not sure exactly of what other churches have done, but to the extent that you've had historical decisions which the Church has advocated that their priests are not employees and that various agents of their activities are not companies and therefore they can't be held liable for the conduct in which they engage, then people have maybe not liked it, but they've at least accepted that that argument was made with sincerity. But then when this comes along and they say, well, none of that was actually applicable and can you please treat us now as a special exception where they are employees, that I think just raises questions in the minds of people about what very powerful institutions are able to do when they set their mind to it.
Yeah, that's another paradox here, and it's...
So as the gentleman said, these are very powerful institutions, and he said that when they set their mind to it, they are able to get things their way as they see, and we will begin to see that happen more and more.
Who can war against the first beast?
Yes, who can war against the beast? Who is like unto the beast?
Yes.
And we see that the state is, well, the Church is telling the state more and more what it should do, and there are individuals who, particularly in the United States, who believe that the Church has been empowered to tell the state what to do, and that more and more individuals from the Church should be directly involved in the state to direct the affairs of the state by the power of the Church. And that's the problem. And they don't see a need for separation of church and state, and they don't understand that by that separation being broken down, it will not be to their benefit for religious liberty, because once that we could almost like a force field, that shield is truly broken and removed, they think that they're going to be able to come in and swoop in and take over, but it's actually going to be that beast, that first beast, that's going to come in and perch and land on that perch. It's not going to be the apostate Protestants. So we just have to call them like they are and who they are. They have various names and institutions and individuals, but ultimately they have apostate. And why do I use that? And that's such a strong language is because they are following after the harlot or their mother, which is Rome, and it is that woman that rides this beast, or rides a beast. And so we see this in the biblical language because, again, this is what they're doing and what will happen in the near future. So these are just examples of how they're flexing quietly, and you have proponents against it, individuals that look for what's considered ethical for these different agencies, and they're calling that into question. But again, we see that, and we see this deadly wound that the Bible talks about being healed, and this beast being restored to its full power and ability. As we go to our last video, we're looking at what happened in Atlanta most recently, and this was there's a little bit of it's talking about a cover-up, but I guess I say a little. It's because very little information was talked about, and then when it was put in a framework that it was not as bad as it was. But let's listen in.
Hey internet friends, we're taking a break from the usual documentary-style videos to chronicle the happenings of 2020 on this channel. And today I welcome you to my own backyard of Atlanta, Georgia, where just last night, after the district attorney filed felony charges against the police officers on the scene of Rayshard Brooks' fatal shooting, Atlanta officers walked off the job in protest. This left Atlanta wide open for crime, and Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms begging for police to return to work. However, curiously absent from this mass exodus was the coverage of it. After all, CNN headquarters are here in Atlanta. This place is crawling with desperate journalists looking to catch the next story, yet the mainstream media didn't report this noticeable police absence for many hours last night. And when they did, they depicted it with complete inaccuracy and total dishonesty. In other words, they behaved exactly as predicted. But alas, I'm here with the inside scoop. If you're unaware of the Rayshard Brooks incident, it comes weeks after the death of George Floyd and the protests that followed. Officers responded to a driver asleep in his vehicle in the Wendy's drive-thru. A field sobriety test was given under the suspicion of a DUI, and when Brooks resisted arrest, officers attempted to subdue him. He assaulted both officers, taking one of their tasers, and fled on foot. Running after him, Brooks is seen on camera.
So, now not to, you can watch the video in that. This is ultimately, these are the things that it could have been handled a lot better, that it would not have escalated to the point that this transpired, because you never, as a law enforcement, you never want the situation to get out of hand. And you don't want the individual who is, you are interacting with to, as in this case, when they were assaulted, to get the upper hand on you and another officer. So you want to always de-escalate the situation. That's one of the questions, and whenever any of these interaction with police of anybody is, what did you do to de-escalate the situation, should be the questions and the focal point, and how could you have handled it better, because in this transpiring, there were people driving. You see these cars in the drive-through line. A errant bullet, a bullet that was misplaced in the heat of the moment, could have easily, by discharging that weapon, could have easily hurt an innocent bystander. And so this is definitely, we're just highlighting this because everyone has their opinions and viewpoints, but when we look at it, there's still protocol, and there is a way to de-escalate a situation so that it does not escalate to it, because every situation and every encounter with cops and a potential suspect does not have to escalate, Because if that was the case, you'd have more and more individuals, even cops getting hurt, because they can be, if the situation escalated and such, and the person gained the advantage on them, then that's where, so you want to de-escalate, you want to calm it down, you don't want to have to wrestle with the individual, even if you can overpower them. And you can use your words, you can use your body language, you can use a lot of things. Yes,
if you watch the video, they did try to de-escalate. I'm not taking one side or the other. They did try to de-escalate it. They talked to the man for a long time.
Well, after 45 minutes, there has to be a point where you recognize something different, because I hear you saying that they did. That's again,
because if they were aggressive, if they were
truly aggressive,
yeah, they would have that would have happened at the beginning. But the talk with the gentleman, now it got out of hand. Both sides were wrong.
Yes,
and it got out of hand. But they did talk to him 45 minutes, or however long they talked. They talked for a
45 minutes.
Yeah, well,
they talked for a long time.
There is. Again,
but it was the way, and I think most people are not. I don't really think people are saying from the sources and the individuals in my circle. Most people are not saying that I'll just say what they're saying. From my circles, it's not the aggressiveness. It's really about policing 101.
Yes.
And so let me give an example of one of the conversation I had with another individual. They said, looking at this video, and I'm actually going to use a well-known program, Cops. Many times they've had drunk individuals all over the country on Cops doing not even half as compliant in their conversation. And let me see who we can get to call, come pick you up. We gonna have to hold your car here, or the man already said I can walk home to my sister's house, and so there are other options that they could have done besides arrest, because technically and legally he was not driving the vehicle; it was in the park,
and
so
they already knew he had previous strikes.
Right.
Well, not impaired, but he had a previous history, which this was going to be a third strike.
Didn't he have a DUI already?
Wasn't it?
No,
it wasn't DUI.
It was broke his bonds, his probationary.
Yeah. He was out on a very unique probationary where he basically, any little thing he did, he was going back and he was going to serve all this time. So he basically got out on the graces of the court to say, hey, if you act right, we're going to allow you out. And so he was out. So he had the fear of going back. And with that fear, it says, thank you for that. It says compassion was absent. So here it is. You see an individual who's like you said, being compliant to the best of their ability, and where, like you said, on the show Cops and shows similar, but particularly that one, which has been on for years, there were many episodes. I mean, it's had thousands of episodes where individuals who were in like manner and, like you said, were even more aggressive themselves, where they were like, okay, we got you here. Don't be kicking on our windows. We'll get somebody over here. And then we'll call somebody. Which that would have verified what he said. If no one answered or they weren't, they said, hey, that was the thing. To talk to somebody for 45 minutes, first 20 minutes, you ascertain how this is going to go. You easily could have called and said, okay, I'm going to call real quick and verify.
Okay. I'm going to just say this. They were wrong for shooting him, but they both were wrong.
We're not.
But we're saying how it escalated to his part.
Why it escalated because he started fighting them.
But
only when the individual
went
to arrest.
If they had gone to more. Because remember, one of the things being a cop.
So was it?
Hold on. One of the things being a cop is when you're going out to situations, is you're supposed to look at the initial reason why you were called out for this. They were called out because a man was blocking the drive-through. They already took care of that and had him move over. Then they realized, okay, this man is impaired. But he's not driving. Mm-hmm. See, they would have. He's not driving the vehicle.
So was it wrong? So all right. So it was it's already established. It was wrong to shoot him. Was it wrong to arrest him?
No, I didn't say it was wrong to arrest. Okay. It was within their rights to arrest him. However, what I am saying is there was other options.
Okay. So what? All right. So it wasn't wrong it was wrong to shoot him, but it wasn't wrong to arrest him.
There were other options.
Was it okay? To go back to my question, was it wrong to arrest him?
And I've already answered that. No,
Well,
but there were other
let's go
options
back
that
to
they
this
could have
statement. Okay, you're saying was it wrong to arrest him? Just because something's expedient or is actually lawful, is it the thing to do? Because as an example, I personally had a outstanding ticket I didn't pay. The cop in his right, he said, I should arrest you, but I'm going to. This is before all this is way before, but the point is, just because he can do it, is that what he should? He knew that, and this individual was cooperative. It's one thing if they're combative.
He was combative.
And no,
he was not combative
after
when
they went to arrest him. But it was
when they went to arrest
he was
him.
in his right to arrest him, wasn't? Because you said you had a ticket.
But
you
hold
had,
on,
you
but
had
you're-
But having a right, why
I'm
did
just
they
saying-
even take it to
I'm just
that?
saying,
When the man said, "Hey, I can go home," because you're saying they have the right. You can be
Okay.
arrested right now in this church.
okay,
Yes, you can.
okay, so
Probable
all right.
cause.
All right, so he could. Okay, you just said you had a
Yeah.
ticket, right?
Yes.
Using your example.
Yes.
So would the police officer be wrong to arrest you?
He already said he would.
No, he would be in his right, but he chose not to.
We get mercy all the time, right? It's up to the individual to display mercy, correct?
Yes.
There's plenty of times I should have had my mother should have whooped me when I was little.
Okay.
She had a right to whip me, but she whipped me sometimes. She didn't whip me sometimes.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So all I'm saying is he was wrong to fight the police officer.
And we agree with
Yes.
that.
And the police officer, that's where the wrong is. He was wrong to fight. He was wrong to fight the police officer, and the police officer was wrong to shoot him.
In this situation,
That's where the wrong is.
the individual, the police officer, escalated when he said, "Hey, give me the chance to call. Let somebody come get me."
Did you watch the video? He did. He couldn't call nobody.
No, the police officer did not ask him that.
I mean, he had the phone in his hand.
He wasn't calling to ask him about that.
He had 45 minutes to call, and he didn't call it. He couldn't.
Okay.
The man could not remember what city he was in. How's he going to call somebody? He didn't know what street he was on. How's he going to call somebody?
So, at this point, we see that being the case, and you using that, they knew then that once they escalated it. So when they did, okay, so they have their right. They're in their right. They're policemen. They arrest him. At that moment, they lost control of the situation, which when they lost control of the situation, that put them in danger, which in turn escalated to where he shot the man.
So does the man
Because-
get any blame? Does the man get any blame?
Hold on, I don't think people are giving him.
Let's back it up. Did we not give him any blame? In other
No,
words,
we haven't
you're
get-
saying
not here, we
I
haven't
haven't
given any
actually even
blame.
given the officers blame. I've only said that the officers
Well, I'm
officers
saying,
up to the point of
at
escalation.
At what point does the individual take responsibility? At what point does the individual take
Well, he
responsibility?
takes responsibility actually when he was drinking, because again, yes, he has an adult, he has the ability to drink, but the thing is, that's when he really took it. So if we want to really go take it back, he put himself, who is out on parole, in a situation where once he got pulled over, once he parked or any of this to happen, he was in it. So you're right.
Well,
So,
okay,
yes.
so he violated parole when he violated parole and he was drinking and driving, correct?
At which point, once he
should
was
have been-
drinking and driving,
which
yes.
justifies him. He should have been arrested.
To be arrested because he is driving intoxicated. But again, we're looking at it from the aspect of how do in policing, because it has been chronicled, you can go back and see the episodes where other police officers have made the decision not to, because they chose not to escalate. Not even a mercy thing. They just said we're not going to.
The man is on
escalate this.
parole.
There have been people on parole.
He's on his third. I'm not saying it was wrong for him to get shot. It was wrong for him to fight. He's on parole. He's on his third strike, so he has multiple offenses against his parole. And now I'm going to arrest him because he's drinking and driving.
Okay, and like you said, I like I said, no one here is denying that he was wrong in fighting. So I guess my question is, where are you going with this? Were they wrong?
No, all I'm saying is
not wrong in shooting him.
No, I already said that they were wrong with shooting him. I'm saying is the man is at fault too.
Well, but no one here said that he wasn't. We all agreed with that he was at fault.
Okay,
I
so
agree that he
so
was at
if you
fault.
if you say that the man is at fault, then don't use this as a racism type thing. I'm just saying in general as a public.
Well, I'm going to point out other people that seem to somehow, every time we've had a mass shooter, they always seem to be taken in custody. Some of them have even, hold on, because I've actually saw a video yesterday where a man actually was tased and everything else.
Mhm.
No, he was tased, actually took tasers
That's
off
what
of
the-
him
and who can-
and
okay,
got him. So having said that, I'm not saying that this is a race thing. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that there is a different treatment of minorities.
And who controls the
by
media?
public.
Who can? If we're going to talk about false media, who controls the media?
I'm not talking about. I'm not
We
talking-
have to go down that road. Who controls the media?
Well, the media and its control is not based on how that police officer chose to handle the situation, which because again, how many of these are not even broadcasted? So again,
Who controls the
on both
media?
sides.
What's the narrative of the media? I mean, if we're going down, what is the narrative of the media?
Well,
right
the
now,
narrative of the media has always been to divide and conquer.
Right.
So to say it changed, it's never changed. It is at the behest of those powers to be being, and I'll name them, whether they're from a conservative political perspective, so that's a whole list of people from the Koch brothers down to Soros on the liberal side to the Jewish interests, which really they're at the behest of the Catholic Church. So when we really want to look at this as a whole, there's a whole list of people who are guiding this thing. But the questions we're saying is at the micro level, human to human level, these are the things that escalate, and in turn, like you said, the individuals didn't use any slanders. They didn't do anything that if you're trying to try them on them showing racism, that's not it. Because we can actually replace them.
So this issue is not a racist issue because he talked to the man for 45 minutes.
No, I would not.
Before he shot him,
It goes
was
back
wrong.
to how
he lost control of the situation.
There you go. And
right,
I
he
had a
lost,
police
but it wasn't a
situation.
racial. This particular situation wasn't a racial
Definitely.
issue.
And
That's all
not
I'm
the-
saying. This particular
But
yes,
I don't
we can
believe
agree
people
with
are
that.
looking at it from.
It's specifically
hold
that.
on, let me finish before you yell at me. What I'm saying, I don't think people are looking at it from the lens of race. I think they're looking at it from the circles I speak to, are looking from the lens of policing.
Policing. Because that's how, because to understand, yes, there are those who put this in that same big basket of this is just another incident of a black man
Because
being
that's
shot
what the
by
media is painting this as a racial
but
issue.
I'm
But
talking,
I
we're
have-
also
that's what I said.
speaking
My circles,
from
I have a
vast-
very wide
diverse.
variety.
So speaking from
right. And it's policing for
individuals who are non-black who are appalled at this, they're looking at it from a policing perspective because they say if I'm there in that situation, I would want to not be escalated because I know that if I was drunk, I'm not going to interact rationally. So therefore, I would want them to see that and say, okay, this person's belligerent or this person, and de-escalate it so that I didn't. Because how many times do people wake up the next morning and say, what did I do? Only to find out they did all kinds of foolishness while under the influence. That's the whole thing. And alcoholism has caused more destruction and death in the world truly than all kinds of things.
How many people
So
are
yes.
murdered on a daily basis because of a drunk driver? How many people?
There's a statistic out there.
How
Quite a
many
few.
people yearly are murdered because of drunk drivers?
It's high.
It's very high. Actually, I know every hour somebody is. I don't know if it's down to the minute, but it is when you say United States alone because drinking is prevalent here. So to keep them off of the road, you're taking this and saying, okay, they were keeping one individual off the road. But many times they kept the keys.
All I'm simply
to
saying
cars, so
this
they could keep
is
an
this
individual from-
incident is not a racial issue.
And we agree.
Okay.
It's a policing issue.
It's a policing
okay,
issue.
I agree. It's a policing issue, but it's
And-
not. This
and
is.
this
But people are
points to-
taking this and say, "Here we go again," and then further fueling the fire, which leads back to who controls the media, because it moves their train into the direction that they want to go, which is to conquer and divide. If you can conquer and divide, then you can institute the New World Order.
Well, whether we wanted to or not, it's headed that way because this again, going back to using the word policing, it's showing poor policing and poor policing on multiple occasions has made the police departments look inept. In this, we find that you had police officers walk off of the job to the point where dispatcher on the scanner is saying, is there anyone out there? And silence because there were not enough individuals out there to respond to calls. There was a backup in Atlanta of calls. If there was car accidents, police didn't, they weren't responding to that. If there were domestic or there was violence without a weapon, they didn't respond to that. This is all that was going on.
So what do you think the solution will be? If
One
that
of
trend
one
continues?
of two things. One of two things. Private police force.
Which will be controlled.
Or a government response, meaning
Which
you'll
will be
bring in
controlled.
troops on there. Of course it'd be controlled. And individuals are becoming more accustomed, and they think that by defunding the police, that's going to change it, but that's not the purpose of those who are really pushing for defunding. The idea is that there will be change, but there's not.
All right, so we
yes.
know where this is headed.
Of
Because
course.
if you defund the police, or you privatize the police, or you federalize the police, instead of being less control, they will be more control. Would you agree with that? There will be more control. There will be more restriction.
More restriction.
You think it was bad before.
Oh, it will be.
It will be worse. It will be worse. If history, that's how we started this segment out.
Yes.
If history is any indication of federalizing the police, history. I'm
Or
not talking about
privatizing.
or privatizing the police. I'm talking about from a historic standpoint. You talking about the Romans. You talk about all these different people.
Well, those countries didn't have. See, people think policing. That's not a accurate.
Oh, let's throw in the Book of Revelation then.
Okay,
let's go with that.
Let's throw in if the Book of Revelation is any indication of federalizing the police. We talked about the second beast. Did we talk about the second beast?
The second beast. No, we hadn't actually touched on the
Oh,
second
okay.
beast.
Well,
now,
maybe
I
we need to talk about the
Captain K. Dot, I want to thank you for your comment. Yes, the arrest is at the discretion of the officer, and how they, again, that's why we highlighted as policing. And thank you, His Rose, for your comments as far as the shooting being unnecessary and that it could have been prevented from escalating, just like in the classroom. You have a young person who because we can equate the two. They like to say, well, okay, because of this background, this person had this predisposition to react negatively. You know that there are young people that have a that you could tell one young person in front of the class, hey, quiet, sit down, and they respond accordingly. But another young person, you would come closer to them and speak to them so that even though you're speaking, you're like, hey, you're dialoguing with them, but you're not giving the appearance in the whole class that you're calling them out. It's a different way. Again, that is classroom management. And as teachers, you begin to learn. And as you learn your students more and more, you can get the most out of them when you understand how to approach them, where other teachers are like, I can't understand. I tell them the same thing, but it's how you tell them. So again, we're not saying that a cop can know all, but a little bit of experience, you begin to see, okay, in this situation, this person let's bring it down. So they bring their voice down. You know, you don't get louder because they're getting louder. All right, okay, sir, let's bring it down. We don't need everybody to hear what we're talking about. Let me understand that. And then you bring it down. Okay, well, I'm sorry, officer. And then but again, we're not questioning that the officer did not have the rights and the things behind him. Now, he's going to be I say unfortunately, due to what happened and due to the climate we are in, and due to, like you said, how the media is pushing it, I don't know if there's a district attorney, but there's someone who is pushing, I believe it's a district attorney, because he's up for re-election. He is pushing for
First degree murder or
one of those.
Yeah,
and so those things, taking it to this level to create a precedence, which
to make an example.
To make an example, and also to garner support within the voting community, his district, and that. So with that being said, does it Because that's going to create a problem where individuals are going to say, if it can be that easy to sentence me and I followed, based on the outline of the law, I followed those things. Even if I didn't have the compassion, but at the end of the day, if I didn't follow just the basics, and I could not only be fired and my loss of wages and that, but I can also be brought up on criminal charges and I got to defend myself, then that's where many are saying, hey, we're not for this.
Well,
and that creates a problem.
Well, I'm
Yes, sir.
not to open this debate up, but
No,
most police in the United States are immune from prosecution anyway for when they
Okay,
do
yes.
negligence and wrong anyway.
Mhm.
So
Some are reconsidering
I
that.
don't think that is a problem.
That it'll go further?
For that things like that to be repealed. For
Mhm.
example, me as a teacher,
Mhm.
or I'll even forget that.
Mhm.
I'll go to something a common industry.
Okay.
Barbers, beauty, and
Hairstylists.
stylists.
Okay.
I know I said it wrong,
Yes.
but stylist.
Hairstylists,
All right.
uh-huh.
One, they're trained far more
Longer,
hours.
yes, many
than-
more hours.
And
It
but
takes
having
like 2,000 or something. isn't it?
3,000.
3,000.
In this
okay.
state, it's
In this
3,000.
state, yes. Almost twice what other states are. Yes.
And I think it's 640 for police officers, and there's 640 hours in this state for police officers.
Yes.
So, but the point I'm making is, can a statistician, I think that's what they're called, but anyway, can they lose their license for
Cosmetologist.
Yeah, can they use their license? Yes. Can be barred from the state? Yes.
They can
Me
be
as a
barred, yeah.
teacher, can I lose all of my credentials and credentialing and
Easily,
everything
yes.
else? Easily, yes. Can I still be held liable for things that I may say or do in the classroom, or even, for that matter, outside of the classroom?
On social media, yes.
And the answer is yes. I don't, now this is my personal view.
Mhm.
I don't think no one's above the law, and I do
Of course.
agree for a long time for our police, along with our parts of our military, because we've seen some of the crimes that they've done
Yes.
in the name of war.
Mhm.
But I do think for a long time that immunity has allowed
Yes. This
bad policing.
bad,
And that's
yes.
I'll
Bad
leave it at that.
behavior.
Because
And-
like for example, you shouldn't have to put a law on the books that say when you see an officer sitting on someone's neck for 8 minutes that you have a duty to say something. You shouldn't have to put that in the law. But
No.
because of you know what I'm saying. But
because of that
those-
immunity that they have, there should be levels of it that in situations, because you understand the content or maybe the idea of it was you shoot a bad guy, he doesn't die, but then he wants to sue for that. That right there, no, if he's considered a criminal and you shoot him, that's because in your home, if somebody breaks in, and we've talked about this, somebody breaks in and you discharge your weapon, even in the act of them breaking in their home, they can sue you.
Well,
and
and
so
if you discharge in the state of Texas, anytime you discharge your weapon, you're going to court.
yes. So with that being said, there still should be not just some added paperwork for an officer, because then it goes back to making them more accountable for justifiable homicide or justifiably using deadly force.
Well, I think, and to be fair, I think a couple of things. Let's start with the officer first. To be fair, anytime they discharge their weapon, it comes up for review.
Well, they are, anytime they are put up for review.
Yes.
However, but the prosecution of when they're negligent, and that's the key.
Well, okay, so yeah, that's
Negligence is
negligence.
That's the
negligence.
problem.
And then as far as the military, to be fair with that, because I was in the military, the individuals, there are some bad people that do some evil stuff in the military.
In all industries.
But for the most part, now, military crimes, that would be, you have to blame it on the generals and the stuff like that if they order something. Now, there's so fine, it's fine lines when it comes to that. The Geneva Convention and all that, what is considered, if you're on this all, when you talk about the prisoners of Guantanamo Bay and all those different things, the reason why they're in a different place is because they're not under U.S. military assault and all these different things, because it gets so technical and convoluted.
No, and I get all that, but So, for example, here's when they did it right. So, because my dad was in the Air Force, so I lived in Okinawa, and I know in Okinawa, there actually used to not be, at least during the time I lived there wasn't an anti-American sentiment. But they've had 3 rape cases in the last 20 years that have changed that tide, where they don't want the Americans on their island, which actually, the Americans actually do hold about 30%. Military bases hold about 30% of the island that's 96 miles long.
Oh, 30% of the landmass.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah,
So
okay.
having said that on top of everything else, but having said that, with the last rape case that they had on their island from one of our soldiers doing that, unlike the other 2 where they kind of tried to ship him back home to the U.S., they turned him over to the Japanese police so that he could be prosecuted. Like I said, holding, and I'm not saying most, because believe it or not, and I don't want to give the impression, because I have family in law enforcement, I have family in the military, and they do excellent, wonderful jobs, and so I'm not even, and that's 99.9% of. We're really talking about the 0.1%.
Yeah, and that's a shame that, like using your example, that's a shame that when you talk about the hundreds of thousands of people that are on military base, over the years, so you're talking millions of people.
One person can destroy all of that.
And so 3 individuals have destroyed the credibility of millions of people at that base. And so it's the same thing with the police force. Just a few individuals, just because you think about any big city has at least 1,000 police officers. Any big city, like Dallas.
Big city, yeah.
Yeah, like Dallas. And so you talk about all the big cities in the United States. You're talking about maybe at least 1,000 big cities in the United States, at least 1,000. So you're saying that's a million or 100 million?
Right, but I will say one.
And so all I'm simply saying is, less than 10 individuals, or less than 20. Let's just say less than 100 individuals make 10 million people. Everybody hate 10 million. 100 individuals make everybody hate.
I think it's more a few 100,000. There's probably more than a million. It's not 10 million officers. I don't.
In the United States?
Well, okay. When I say that,
maybe a couple million in the United States.
Yeah, I think there's more like that, because that would almost outnumber
the military.
Itself.
Okay, so maybe a couple million people.
So, because I know if you're counting all sheriffs, everybody, there's still.
But if we want to be fair, I don't.
Yes.
That's like saying that, which the media does too, and that's what my problem with, one of my huge problems that I have with the media is they what's the word I'm using for? They make black males to be out in certain image. They do.
Well, I'm gonna take your thing, and I'm actually gonna go a little deeper than that, because actually, since the 13th Amendment, black males have been criminalized in this country.
Right, and the media propagates that.
Hold on, there was no media in the 1860s.
Well, there
was newspaper.
Okay, well, I'm talking about now it is the media.
No, but what I'm saying, where I'm going with this is, there is whether you want to see it or not, or maybe don't acknowledge it, I don't know, that's not important. There is a criminalization of black people in this country that has been around before slavery ended, and is still continuing and perpetuated today.
Okay, so why is it? And then you have to get to the root problem.
And when you said about the 13th Amendment, or if you look at it, you have the prison industrial complex, which now has it's a new form of slavery.
Right.
And for the longest, they had individuals working, in the work camps and that, and they still work. And it's free. So it's next to free labor.
Let's take that.
And it was free labor called the Black Code.
All right, let's take that.
Codes,
okay,
yes.
Let's take the prison, since you bring the prison industry. Who owns you have to follow the money. Who owns the prison industry? Let's go down this road. Let's go down this road.
Yeah, but
let's go down this.
Let
me finish my thought. Let me finish my thought. Who owns the private prison industry?
Tell us, because I know you've done
the media.
Yes.
All right, and what music what media does the media, what is the popular music in the medium? It's popularizing drugs, it's popularizing crime, it's popularizing sex. Anything that makes you want that taps into your base animal nature, so that it can feed into the prison system.
Yes.
And you work in the education industry, correct? So at what grade level do they know how many prisons to build?
I know it's kindergarten, but that's because I've also got a criminal justice background as well.
Right, so the system is built to keep individuals feeding into the system.
I understand.
Black and white, but
So
particularly
in order to correct the system, you have to at some point say, I refuse to buy this. I refuse to participate in this, because I know that the system is built to build into the criminal justice system.
And I agree with all that, but I also believe that education is a key to changing other parts, because you can stop your money for a period of time, but that still doesn't change for the other populations and individuals out there. That still doesn't change how you are viewed.
Okay, so if you talk about the education system, who owns the education system?
You do.
No, who owns the education? Who owns the public education system?
You do.
The public? The public writes the textbooks?
Hold on. You asked who owns it. I'm giving you the.
Yeah. Oh well, okay. I pay taxes. Yeah, you pay taxes. Okay, but who writes the curriculum?
Men and women do.
Okay, we're gonna go down this road.
So let's walk down.
All right. So the men and women that write the curriculum, where are they educated, and who funds them? Who gives them their grant money? Okay, yeah, special interest groups that control the media,
or who are in consortium.
Because it's a systemic problem.
Oh, it's systemic. So once again, it proves my point.
What point is that?
That, like I said, it's
policing,
just a different time,
yes,
and the narrative is just different for the time.
Well, I mean, so we're agreeing upon the point, but you have to get to the root. The root of the problem is who controls the money, and what is their agenda. If you want to stop that agenda, which you can't stop that agenda because it's a revelation issue.
Right.
But if you somehow you suppose that you can stop this train, you'd have to get to that root. You have to get to that problem. You have to get to the individuals that are funding the grant, who are funding the grant money to do the research, because the research is all skewed up. You can make statistics look whatever you want it to look like. You can you rewrite the history books to fit your narrative. So until we're ready to go to that, and nobody's ready to go to that, which it's all, I know I'm talking in circles, but it's all, you go to the book of Revelation, this has to be this way. But all I'm simply saying is, then why am I getting angry for this?
I don't know.
Because
I'm just saying, why am I getting angry for racism when I know that it's a problem that's up on top when people are controlling the strings?
Yes. So this is why we are
and I
called.
can tell you why, because you're still human, and you still don't like to see anybody, regardless of the race, be oppressed.
Okay. Well, all right. So what is ultimately the problem then? Sin.
No, I agree with you 100%.
So
What is the solution?
Christ.
Right.
Yes. And we have a mission. What is the mission?
To tell the world this world is fixing to sink.
But there's a specific one. Remember, we was trying to figure out where it was.
The
Revelation.
3 angels' messages.
Chapter what? 14 verses 6
Yeah,
13.
14, 14.
Okay, which is the 3 angels' message telling us that this world has been in the process of judging. So yes, His Rose, it is sin. So we see this as an issue. We understand it, and we now know what is the solution. So we must be about our Father's business, because otherwise we will be going in circles, as they say, proverbially chasing the rabbit or a dog chasing his tail, and we'll never catch it, and be able to resolve it, because we are sojourners. We are not, this is not our home. So therefore, if we think in those terms, because we're passing through, we're saying, I'm going to a better place. This better place is here based on the Word of God. Let me tell you about it. Because attempting to change all of this, one of the things is we got to lay head start if we really think about this. Because a lot of this, had the men and women in the United States have dealt with many of these things back when they first saw it happening, they could have curbed it, or even, we say, delayed this. But this thing, because think about it, the blessing of the Lord is, what year were you talking about Reconstruction during those times of the slave codes and the policing?
After 1877.
So we're talking, this is what, 2020. So you're talking, well over 100 years. It took 100 and some years for it to, we went through all these different things from that point in history to now, and where easily we could have had huge, they call them race wars, and wars against, men against, and women against other groups and that, but yet the Lord stayed that. The angels held that back. But we're seeing, as they begin to let loose of that, we're seeing we're seeing it recur more and more, and not in other parts of, we're seeing it in the United States, which tells us it's like a wake-up call, it's like an alarm going off. It's that first time. So we hit the snooze button, but then it goes right off, and it feels like, okay, I got 10 minutes, and then in just a moment, then, so these alarms are happening, and they're happening more and more, because this unrest is going to continue. This is not the only unrest, just like there's going to be no more waves of the pandemic to get people, in fear, to push the narrative. Not saying that there are not cases, but when we look at the statistics and numbers, it's traveling right along with the past years. But at the end of this, it is heading us toward that way. So we are to wake up and sound the alarm.
Have you read those Jack Hick comments yet?
My son has been reading them.
You need to get in. You need to go in, because it talks about a lot of this stuff.
But I will say one thing, because
Yes, sir.
while you were talking, it actually made me think about the roots of this
Yes.
church, because the church actually
Seventh-day Adventist Church.
The Seventh-day Adventist Church,
Mhm.
yes, they actually did. Because I do know, believe it or not, race was actually a big topic in 1850s, 1860s, and afterward. Because I know they were actually put together with. The abolitionist movement was actually talked about in church, and even in this church, where that was one sign for the beast power, and that if you believed in slavery, that you were not going to have, so some of
Say
those.
it again. Say that last part you said
If
again.
you believed in the.
No, the part you said before that.
In slavery.
No, before you said that about the beast power.
That they were tied together. The racism
Yeah.
was tied together with the beast power. Correct.
That's why I
that's
say
a
you need to read
historical.
those.
That's a historical.
I know.
fact.
Yes, that's why I
yes.
say you need to read those, Jay.
Yes.
Chick.
Yes.
Comments.
So that was believed in our church, and actually, that was one of the
Identified,
things.
yes.
But also the only reason why I'm bringing this part up, not really to go into the history, but I just want to bring up one point, was that while those discussions of whether slavery was right or not were having amongst the different people in that time period, or even afterward about the Civil War and all of its ramifications, it was shared that people started looking at the scriptures for answers. And when you look at history, usually when there's problems with race or class, the scriptures are looked to for answers. And so I just wanted to point out, the Lord always has his way of bringing people back to him
In the Word.
the Word. So I just wanted to point out, I know that's one of the things that Sister White actually, now she's, as we've already said, race issues are not going to be solved on this earth.
No.
However, they are going to be solved for the believer, because a true believer of Christ won't hold racist ideology in their mind, because Christ isn't,
it's
that there's no space for that. So I just wanted to point out, there is a purpose that on God's part that it does serve, because I know there are other Christians that believe, different races are demonic and all this other nonsense. And maybe in the Lord's own way, he's breaking some of that ideology.
Definitely. Because there will be a time when every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess. Yes, sir.
No, it's just like we were talking on yesterday. Like I said, he says, what CJ said as far as God has a strange way of doing things sometimes. Oh, my hearing aids pop. Sorry about that. So he did it again. Has a strange way of doing stuff at times. Like during this whole pandemic, people have been locked indoors. And so they haven't been able to watch sports. They haven't been able to go this place or go that place, go to the store. So they've been forced to examine the relationship with their families. They've been forced to examine, if you're a Christian, I'm hoping that it would have forced you to examine your relationship with Christ. And it's kind of shifted so you can have more, if you're a Christian, have more clarity.
Well, you have time to study.
You have time to study, and you have time to see, wait a minute, this isn't what I thought it was about whatever it may be. You had time to, the noise has been reduced, so you have time to look around and say, wait a minute, I thought this was like this over here, but it's not like I thought it was. Or I thought this, or even if you were looking at a person, from a spiritual perspective, and we are all guilty of this, which we shouldn't be guilty of it, but we are guilty of it, where we compare ourselves to a person spiritually, and we say either one or two things: I am better than that person spiritually, or I wish I was like that person spiritually. When we shouldn't be comparing ourselves with anybody spiritually, our mark should be Christ.
Yes.
But this whole time has allowed individuals just to look. The noise has been quieted around them.
Or should we say the Lord has allowed people to have the time?
Yes.
Because unfortunately, not everyone has looked towards their salvation.
No.
They've actually been more entrenched.
But they've had the time and they've had the opportunity.
I was going to say, no one can deny and say that they didn't have the Lord didn't stop worldwide.
Well, yeah, you can literally say that the world actually came to a halt.
Yes, it did, literally.
I mean, even the Lord even took time to heal
the land,
and the air, and in different
regions.
Right.
All right. Well, we'll close on that note. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for your Sabbath. I pray that the special blessings that are poured out, your closeness, you desire to tabernacle with us during this time, that we received it because we opened our hearts. And Lord, in these closing hours of the Sabbath, if we have not allowed you to draw near, and we still have you standing at the door of our heart knocking, I pray that we will allow you in, and that we will allow you to come in and change this stony heart to a flesh heart, and to revive us and to renew us, that we will have revival and reformation within our lives, and that we will see that in the church at large. We thank you for this in the holy and precious name of Yeshua the Christ. Amen.